A retired Russian paratrooper says that half-dead Russian soldiers are being sent back to the front line in handcuffs after being denied medical treatment or examinations. He complains that Putin should be conscripting foreign migrants rather than Russians. The man, who identifies himself as Sergei from the Lipetsk region of Russia, has recorded a pair of videos complaining about the way in which the 98th Airborne Division, Military Unit 65451, is treating its men. He sarcastically calls it the 98th Penal Battalion. Our valiant soldiers are being shoved into buses half dead and taken to the front lines. That's the morality of the shit commander. Why is this done by the leadership? It is not only the airborne forces, it is everywhere, in all directions. The paratroopers of the 98th Division, who are half alive, before boarding a bus to be sent behind the ribbon, have their crutches taken away, are put on a bus, and they leave to fight half alive. They are not sent to the VVK, Military Medical Commission, to have their fitness rated on purpose because there is simply no one to replace them. A plea for help. They, the wounded, even those went through the VVK, are not sent home. They are not discharged. That is, they want to send them back to the ribbon, the front. Some, the wounded, the sick, are not even sent to the VVK, so that later they can be sent to the ribbon, that is, to military action, half dead. They are handcuffed. They are chained to weights, like dangerous people. The paratroopers have no rights there, like in serfdom, that they only owe and no obligations. And the fact is that half of them die in hospitals, especially in Kostroma, where they do not receive any proper medical services, and therefore no action is taken. They are not sent to the Military Medical Commission. No medical care is provided to them. They are simply pressured, and people die. When I was there, 9 people died in rehabilitation in 2 weeks from failure to provide care. And we handed over money to those who are in rehabilitation, who are simply told there is no medicine, no money for medicine. But the head of the Kostroma hospital drives a white Lexus. It is not clear where the money went. Where is the FSB looking? Sergei blames Putin personally for failing to mobilize immigrants who hold Russian citizenship, leaving the burden to fall on native Russians instead. In fact, large numbers of mostly Central Asian migrants have been mobilized, often forcibly. These citizens were invited to Russia, having purchased citizenship from prostitutes and whores employed by the Migration Service of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. They commit terrorist acts, robberies, murders, rapes, pedophilia, drug trafficking, and all the most serious offenses under the criminal code of the Russian Federation. And by the way, more than 90% of them are not officially employed. They hang up advertisements like these all over the Lipetsk region and provide repair services there. What other services? Do they receive money? They don't pay taxes. But they receive a full social package, even an increased one. Everyone knows about this, and no one takes any action because they share with the law enforcement system. They don't get SMS messages for mobilization like we have in the Lipetsk region and with other organizations. And that's why they are not drafted into the army. Our valiant warriors are deceitfully shoved onto buses and taken away. That's the moral of the story. Commander-in-Chief Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin, our boys, I've said it many times, and you've seen it. Young men who could have built families, good families, are dying, but they were not given that chance. Putin blocked their path to life, to prosperity, to everything, because he doesn't want to call up these creatures and pigs who are wreaking havoc here. Well, you'll get what's coming to you. Listen to me, you stinking pigs, you'll get what's coming to you. In the Lyman sector, fighters of the Signum Battalion took out a motorcycle with a Russian occupier, a quad bike, a UAZ, and a Bukhanka van belonging to the invaders. They also spotted and destroyed a pickup truck with a special upgrade, a Soviet carpet. It seems that such camouflage in the form of rags did not save the Russians from hell. Ukrainian defenders have successfully repelled multiple Russian assaults in the Lyman sector, including near settlements such as Rydkodub, Rakivka, Myrn, Shandryholov, and Kolodiazy. with at least 7 attacks thwarted and 3 still underway. According to information from Ukraine's Center for Countering Disinformation, Putin is preparing to justify his aggression to Trump by claiming that Ukraine is supposedly an artificial state formed from the territories of other countries. These are geographical maps which, according to Putin's plan, are meant to prove to Trump that Ukraine is supposedly an artificial state formed at the expense of territories of other countries. This is allegedly intended to justify the Kremlin's military aggression against Ukraine and Russia's claims to Ukrainian territories. Such pseudo-historical speculations are a typical tactic of Russian propaganda, which Putin himself has repeatedly used in public speeches. This approach is unacceptable from the standpoint of international law, which clearly enshrines the principles of territorial integrity, inviolability of borders, and the illegality of the use or threat of force. Most modern countries or their parts in the past belonged to other states. This also applies to present-day Russia, which was once part of the Golden Horde, and many current Russian territories previously belonged to other states, Germany, Sweden, Finland, etc. However, no historical facts, let alone pseudo-historical fantasies, can justify territorial claims or excuse armed aggression against other countries. Ahead of Ukraine peace talks between the leaders of the United States and Russia, Kiev's military intelligence chief has pointed to an unlikely country emerging stronger from the ashes of war: North Korea. By supporting Moscow's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the communist regime has gained critical battlefield experience, along with access to advanced weapons, military tech, and tactical training that have not only impacted the course of the war in Europe, but could also affect the balance of power in Northeast Asia. There are currently only 3 countries in the world with the experience of waging a modern war on a very long front line using virtually all available conventional means. These are Ukraine, Russia, and North Korea. Ukraine's Chief of Defense Intelligence, General Kirill Budanov, told the Japan Times. The lessons from this conflict are now being passed on to the entire 1.3 million-strong North Korean military. This, along with the technologies being transferred by Moscow and Pyongyang's growing mastery of modern warfare tactics, clearly have a negative impact on security in the Pacific region, Budanov said in an exclusive interview. About 5,000 North Korean soldiers are believed to have been killed or injured after an estimated 12,000 were sent last year to repel Ukraine's incursion into Russia's Kursk region. Pyongyang only admitted in April that soldiers had been killed in the fighting, while also declaring that contributions to combat operations had concluded. Budanov pointed to several reasons why North Korean troops suffered such a high casualty rate, especially early on in their involvement, with the main factor being their unpreparedness for 21st century warfare. What they had trained for in North Korea turned out to be less relevant for today's modern assault operations, he said. There was also poor coordination with Russian troops on the battlefield, especially due to the language barrier, resulting in some instances of friendly fire, meaning that North Koreans mistakenly shot at Russian servicemen. But the North Koreans adapted quickly, Budanov said, pointing out that these troops have been transformed on the battlefield, gradually adopting modern combat tactics and equipment. North Korean troops operate like Russian ones, mostly in small groups. They have learned to move quickly, not only using drones, but also defending against them, he said. Ukrainian military intelligence estimates North Korea has replenished its forces in Russia. Including those in Kursk, the number of troops is back to around 12,000, meaning that most of those killed or injured in action have been replaced to wartime highs. Budanov doesn't rule out Pyongyang's deployment of additional personnel either openly or covertly, for example, under the guise of migrant workers. Following last month's resumption of direct flights between Pyongyang and Moscow and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's offer of unconditional support to Russia. This comes after Russian Security Council Secretary Sergei Shoigu announced in mid-June that Pyongyang would send military engineering units totaling 6,000 military personnel to clear mines and carry out reconstruction work in the Kursk region over the coming months. When asked about this, Budanov raised doubts about whether this will be the mission's sole objective. Some of them may indeed be involved in demining and building fortifications. But will all of them do that? He noted, adding that the deployment plans also feature 50 to 100 units of North Korean equipment, including M2010 or Cheonma-D, main battle tanks, and BTR-80 armored personnel carriers. Indeed, as Moscow looks to solidify recent territorial gains, Pyongyang's support for Russia has not only included troops, but also some tens of thousands of shipping containers suspected of carrying artillery rounds, as well as mobile anti-air and anti-tank missiles, among other weapons. A move that highlights the speed at which bilateral ties have deepened since the two nations signed a mutual defense treaty just over a year ago. According to Ukraine's military intelligence agency, North Korea currently supplies 40% of the Russian army's needs for 122mm and 152mm munitions, production of which reportedly continues around the clock in North Korea. Russia has also received hundreds of units of artillery systems, multiple rocket launchers, and missiles from Pyongyang. Some of these weapons initially showed low efficacy, Budanov said, but the Russians have succeeded in eliminating many of these shortcomings, with one example being the 690-kilometer range KN-23 missile, which has now become effectively battle-tested and refined. The missile's accuracy, unfortunately, has increased after Russian modernization, Budanov said.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. Also, if you want to support Warthog Defense, please become our member and get early access to new videos, exclusive members-only videos, and become administrator in comments section. The membership link is in the description.
Rescues every day. We had a guy last week, it's 6 rescues in 6 days. You know, he's doing the job every day.